Hey, it's Katie Moran.
And MJ Coppola.
We're sharing an 11-part mindful mental health mini-series called RNTKY, sharing 11 reasons not to kill yourself. It started as a blog post, YouTube video, and now Discord community where we host gratitude challenges. Episodes will be coming out Tuesdays and Thursdays between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day. Today's episode is There's Something to Learn. There truly is always something to learn. Learning something new can help release your brain from replaying old narratives that no longer serve you. You are called to become better, and learning is a powerful tool in self transformation. Learn something new, and you will find more direction. So, MJ, what do you feel about this reason that there's something to learn?
Oh, man. So a while back, for some college project, I ended up doing this like kind of personality-ish test, if you will. And one of my top traits was the curiosity, and I'm always constantly like looking to like learn something new. That took me a while to get to that place because even going back and looking to my college days, every time I would get into a new class, there's always this like feeling that I get when I start something like, how come I don't know this already? Like, I feel really stupid. And like that narrative kind of plays. And I think about where that comes from. And some of that comes from, growing up in a place where, I went to public school. Not that this is something only in public school, but and because I didn't necessarily learn like all the rest of the kids learned or how the teachers wanted us to learn, I didn't really fit in that way. And I always felt like I was behind or I was slow. With that, I always got called kind of like names growing up. So I tended to keep to myself, that kind of thing. So learning for me comes from a place of learning how to learn and drop the narrative of like, you're stupid, you can't do this, how come you're so slow. It took me a while to get there, and those narratives really fed heavily into some of my depressive phases. And so I really like this reason because once I learn how to embrace um, the curiosity of not knowing, it became a lot easier for me to learn. And even to this day, like I just recently was like, I want to learn how to juggle. It's just an FYI, I still have not figured it out, but it was just kind of like just gonna learn this thing. And we have, I mean, we have people in the Discord group that have learned how to do some incredible things like artwork and coming from a place where you could see their progress. And it's wonderful to think like we start off like baby steps. When you're a child, you don't judge yourself on you don't have like the cognitive thought process when you're like 3 years old, like, okay, or two, how do I walk? We don't think about it. We're just learning as
Mhm.
babies. And um it's nice to be able to see that progress if you're open to be able to see that progress.
I can really relate to that. When I was in high school, I went to a private school and we had to take like exams to get into the school. And I actually got into this school on academic probation because my scores were so low. And I had to take a whole bunch of classes, the study skills class. And then in college, when I was struggling with my mental health, I was put on academic probation because I had to drop out of a lot of my courses, and I dropped out of the university one time too, and then went back the next semester. So I definitely relate to that. And I never used it as a narrative to hold myself back because I felt like I had so many obstacles, and also like not that many people knew what was going on, so I didn't really get it like an external kind of like narration that I had to like internalize. So for me, it was something that I wasn't afraid to be intimidated. And I actually was on academic probation and made dean's list in the same semester. And I remember just thinking like how ridiculous it was that I was on dean's list, but also like academic probation. And I think a lot of the times we think one thing has to like define us. And the truth is none of it really does. And that it's all just circumstance, and that we don't have to be just defined by our circumstance, but by our courage to redefine our circumstances. And I think that's always so important to remember. And I think something that I feel like has always been something that has helped me was that even when I'm intimidated, I'll give something a shot. And I think about this year I had one of the biggest clients I've ever had before, and I was sick to my stomach before it, and I was like thinking about like how could I do this, and I did it anyway, and it made me a better coach because I had the courage to do that even though I was intimidated. And then I was on an accountability group, and I remember someone had said to me, I don't think I'm going to go, like it's a little intimidating. And I thought to myself, like that's when you need to go, is because that's what gets you to the next level. That's what challenges you. That's what keeps you gaining momentum. And I remember I went and it was like it was the opposite of intimidating. But it's just funny that so many of us see things as like not for us, or we see our capacity as limited. And it's so truthful that our capacity is only limited by our own mindset and by our own paralysis in defining it as limited. And so much of the time, if we take those steps to that where we feel inadequate, that's what really like shows us how to develop those skills. And kind of like every time you take on a new skill, you feel like you know nothing and you feel inadequate, and that's part of the process, and that's what gets you those skills. For me, the skill the most that has mattered the most to me has been writing. And I remember I was actually in college, my test scores were so low that I had to take like the basic English course, and everyone else, their test scores were higher, that they skipped the first two basic English courses, and I had to take all of them. And I remember actually I had dropped this one course, text and context, 9 times. Well, actually, I dropped it 8 times or 7 times. I failed it once, like actually failed. The only course I've ever failed in my whole life, text and context. And then the last time I actually got an A, and it was my first ever published paper. And I remember thinking to myself, this is my first publication. They put it in with like other people in text and context that had it. It was peer reviewed. And they said they said freshman writing because it was like a freshman course. And I was actually, I think I was in my second senior year because my credits were so far behind. And like I started from like zero to kind of like get to that place where I was able to write in a way that I would impact people. And even now when I receive criticism from like my writing and things like that, it just makes me a better writer. And I think so much of the time people start in an advanced way, and kind of like the tortoise and the hare, you just like don't keep progressing, and you think that you don't have to keep progressing. And it's so important to recognize that the better you are, the more you have to keep improving, and that your strengths are really things that are always meant to grow and to build momentum and to impact people in more profound ways. And that's a responsibility we all have with the things that we love and things we're passionate about.
Yeah, I have like two things that like really struck me. Is one is this like we kind of talk about this in a lot of the episodes, or through a lot of your content you talk about this, is like kind of showing yourself that you can show up for yourself. And I think learning is like an amazing way to do that. It not only kind of connects you to the rest of the world in a way that you have not been connected to the world previously. But it also, little things like showing up, like you were saying, or like, this made me really nervous, I feel intimidated. And then like literally just today, we were talking about this, our schedules for recording, and I was like, I have an interview, but I'm nervous. And you were just like, you got this. Like, you'd be a joy to have in the company. And I was like, see, this is the stuff this is why we need a community, because I needed that, and it was exactly how it was, like the opposite of intimidating. It was like, I knew like the jobs that I've been, or the jobs and the projects that I've been going for lately are in my brain like well above my pay grade. But the fact of the matter is, like, people are still people, and even those people are still people. And I'm finding the more I show up for those uncomfortable things, those moments, that the more I'm realizing that, like, I'm really not as different as I think I am, as far as that's concerned. Then also the power of yet. So, like, sometimes when I'm learning something and I'm like, man, I am just like, I don't understand this. And so I want to say two things about that. One, you don't understand yet. Maybe there's somebody who can explain it differently. Maybe it's just like, we need to go back to more basics before you get that more advanced thing, but showing up for a yet situation, like nothing's impossible, just hasn't been figured out yet. And having that, like, I think I literally had a sticky note somewhere at some point that just had like yet on it. It was just like yet, because it was that mentality. And I think going through college, especially, where it literally, dude, guys, I have an associate's degree, and it took me like 5 years to get an associate's degree. Like, I was full-blown mom, full-time job, like trying to run a household, and there were days where I felt so frustrated by it, because I was like, what am I even doing? Like, what am I even doing right now? But as I stood there, and I specifically went to my graduation, there was like a small amount of us that were sitting in this like associate's, because my friend was like, who sits and goes to their associate's degree graduation? I do, because it was such a big deal for me. So, and it's okay to like celebrate those things. Like, it's okay to celebrate the things that maybe other people are like, why would you celebrate that? Why not? It was such a personal accomplishment. And my friends, like my real friends, and were very excited for me, because they understood like how much that really took for me to get there. And I think, and also going back to learning, like when you feel like something's just too much, it's okay to say like, this is just not for me. Like it's okay to recognize that maybe something you're learning, it just isn't. Maybe it was only meant to learn the basics. Like I don't know if I'll ever be a computer coder. Like, I've tried on several occasions to like understand that, and it just doesn't stay. And that's okay. Like, I know if I really, really wanted to, I could torture myself enough to get there if I wanted to. But it's like, in the world where there's a billion of us, why learn something that you don't really need to? Like, maybe your expertise is somewhere else, or maybe your like drive to learn something is in a different space, and there's always value in whatever you're learning. Like, it could be learning how to text in context. Like, maybe that's what you're learning. That's totally fine. It's just so important. And then the learning how to learn is also like, the more you know how you in particular take on information and retain that information, the better it's going to be. And the more the less yuck you're going to feel when you're actually learning that thing. And it took me years to understand what that meant. But I tend to be a person who needs to take action to learn. So initially I will learn through visual and audio, and then I have to do that thing in order for it to stay. So I'll learn it if I just listen to it and watch it, but in order to retain it, I have to do it. So whatever that means. But you can learn all of those things. There's plenty of resources on like how to learn. I actually have two separate things that I use to do that, but yeah.
Yeah, I actually am reminded of this idea of trauma and memory and trauma and learning. And sometimes we're going through a lot, and it kind of like it brings our energy so low that we can't feel like we can learn, and we feel like paralyzed. And for me, when I actually found that text and context course, it was Greek and Roman mythology, which I had a background in. I studied it when I was younger. And it was so hard for me in that class because there was this person who was like teacher's pet, like star student, and he was actually named the same name of the person who sexually assaulted me like previously. And then there was a student who was in the back who would be called on sometimes, who had the same name of the person I was seeing when I was sexually assaulted, that ended that relationship. And it was just devastating for me to be in that class. And I felt like I was reliving it all over again. And I was silent about it. I hadn't talked to anyone about it. And it was so challenging for me. And I remember I was with my psychiatrist and psychologist, and both of them had said to me that it wasn't the academic work that was challenging and that I was capable of doing it. And they didn't really know exactly the details of everything, but they said there's no reason you shouldn't be passing. And I remember the only time I ever really broke down in therapy were the two times I talked about like not achieving my academic potential, because it hurt so much what I was going through, and I told no one. And actually the Greek and Roman mythology class, I didn't turn in a single paper. And I remember I talked to the professor, and she was like, if you want, you could just drop the course, and and that's it. And I remember I had this conversation with her, and I was like, I've dropped this course 7 times. I can't do it again. Even if I fail, I want to fail, because I've just dropped this too many times. And I did fail. And the next time it was so important to me that I actually passed. But yeah, I named my company Fetus and Themis Inclusive Equanimity, my advocacy company. And those are Greek goddesses. So it's just something that's so important to me, like the mythology behind that, and the meaning for me. Like Themis symbolizes justice, and also Thetis is the mother of Achilles. And it always reminds me just the power of femininity and masculinity. And I think Achilles really shows kind of like the duality there, because it shows that he has this weakness. And I think a lot of the times in masculinity, it's not shown that men have any weaknesses. And it always reminds me of that. And also because she like held his heels into when she dipped him in the river. So that always reminds me kind of like of this kind of like power of femininity and masculinity. And that was something that was really important to me when I was first starting the company. And just to think that all these things in my past that really were detrimental to me really became things I reclaimed, and that became a place of empowerment for me. And I just want to speak to anyone out there who feels like they're incapable, or they're stupid, or they can't learn something because they've been through too much, and they are impacted by what they've been through. They're not processing it, they're not healing it, and they're not giving themselves enough time to move through it, and they're not being honest with themselves about what they have to move through. I just want to recognize those people and tell you that where you are now is not a reflection of where you'll be, and you can choose to change your narrative at any point in time, like I have with mine, and to go through everything I went through with that text and context class, and then to have my first publication be from that course. The last time I took it was something that was so meaningful to me, because it really took everything in me, like everything, to experience that course full circle.
That is such an incredible story. I have legitimately never heard either. So it's so lovely to hear that. And like being able to change that narrative, like on a broader scale for myself, that's what graduating with that associate's degree was for me. It was that changing the narrative in my head constantly of like, you're so stupid and you can't do this. Like, no, I'm going to do this, you know? And I can definitely, like, the things that not so much the things that I learned during that, but just showing up for the learning in general, had that kind of, it's probably why it took me so long, is because I was also processing some, trauma from the people who were telling me that, during my life. So I can totally, and I think there's power in, again, just deciding to show up anyway, because like your story, like you failed that course like 8 times, or not failed it, but didn't, whatever. So I think, but you're like, no, I'm going to get this, and it doesn't, what is that saying? And I hate it a little bit because it's so like widely used, but like fall down 7 times, get up 8 kind of thing. It's not really the number of times you don't get something, it's how many times, and you learn something each time. So then with the learning, because we're constantly learning anyway. But there is something to be said about being in such a state, a mental state, or having a traumatic experience that literally blocks you from having the mental capacity to, or the energy. So for me, it always feels like I don't have enough energy to do that thing when I'm in that mode. Because learning does take a little bit of oomph, so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, actually that saying inspired I think one of my most memorable posts in my mind, the Japanese proverb, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. Actually, if you fall down 7 times, you only need to stand up 7 times to be standing. And I always say that 8th time is when you lift someone up. And just thinking about like Japanese culture and everything they went through, like in Hiroshima and things like that, and how they really rebuild stronger than before. And that's part of their culture, is to lift other people up, is something that is really powerful in my mind, and something that I always make a point to share and prioritize.
I like that. I do remember that post too, because I think that's really important. Is it's not just about the how many times you're getting up and not doing the thing. It's also, and again, I'll go back to the whole invisible impact thing. You don't know who saw that, or who subconsciously saw that you kept getting up, without even realizing it. I remember my daughter saying to me one time, she's like, I know during school, she'd be like, you are just always working. Either you're working at work or you're working when you get home. And it broke my heart because I felt like I wasn't at the time spending enough time with her. And so I kind of adjusted things to be slower in school so that I can still show up for her. But later on, she was like, I remember you spending so much time on that. And like later on, the lesson wasn't, for me, the lesson was everything in moderation, because I was spending so I was so into trying to get it done that everything else kind of like shut down for me to get it done. But lesson for her, later on was like, well, mom really showed up and did it, even though everything seemed, everything was hard. And I think for me, I'm blessed to be able to know that, because it's not something that like I would have known, if it was somebody other than her, maybe, you know? So.
Yeah, that's powerful. And we talk about invisible impact. And actually, I was on a call one time and someone brought up that proverb, and someone on the call was like, actually, I saw a post one time and they explained it. And I was like thinking to myself, like, this really is invisible impact, because they're like explaining to me my post. And and I'm just like, actually, I posted that. They were like, oh yeah, it was you, wasn't it?
That's happened before to me too. Someone will explain something. I'm like, I think I said that in my podcast. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're good. I'm like, okay, don't clap.
That's invisible impact, is that it doesn't even matter where it comes from. Like, you can be completely invisible, but it matters that the message reaches the person who needs to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and it's like our this guy, words are funny. Our knowledge is ours, but knowledge is not ours. I don't know if that makes sense. And I
Explain
think
it.
that so the knowledge that we attain is our knowledge. We get to keep that. We get to use it. We get to experience it. We get to wield it as a tool, if you will. But that knowledge itself is not inherently our knowledge. Like, there is something to be said about, and this is a total another episode and something completely different, but intellectual property, that's a whole thing. But like, when you talk about like E equals MC squared, like that's like broad knowledge. Everybody gets to learn that if they want to, like experiencing the world the way you see it through your eyes is knowledge that's available. Like, everybody can experience their own, without going too deep, their own worlds. Like, we can all learn the things. So basically what I'm saying is that we get to use the knowledge that we acquire. So the more knowledge we acquire, the more of use we can be in the world, I feel like. Not necessarily, but you can learn anything. So you don't even really have to do anything, and you will find whatever you're doing, and you'll be an expert, if even without trying sometimes. But but then we can choose to use that, and then the knowledge and how we've experienced it, we can share that like a story to other people to use for their knowledge, to add to their own well of knowledge. So it's like this lovely little like give and take, you know? I totally just like tripped over all of that, but have at it.
Well, it reminds me, I can't believe we got this far without talking about a growth mindset, but I think we
No.
can define a growth mindset in Carol Dweck's own words. In a growth mindset, people believe that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are just the starting point. This view creates a love of learning and a resilience that it is essential for great accomplishment. So just this idea that who you are today isn't who you're always going to be, and that you can learn something and you can grow, and that it's really something that doesn't have to define you. Even the knowledge you know now is something that can always expand, and specifically that you can develop it, and that you can choose to develop it, and that you have autonomy in gaining skills and acquiring skills, especially if you use them to serve others, which I think is something that's so important. And that's what I've done with storytelling and content creation. That's helped me share my messages online, which has been transformational in my life. And it really has helped me reach other people with whether it be suicide prevention or healing from sexual assault or just mental health in general. It's something that is so important to me, and to be able to share that with thousands of people now is something that I never would have imagined when I was all alone, suicidal, with really no hope.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was talking about with the, our knowledge is ours. We get to have it, but also knowledge is ours, like as a whole, like as a, it's, we can acquire skills and whatever that looks like. And I think to be able to use that, I mean, and then kind of goes back to, I know for me, that gives me purpose. I'm like, look, I get to learn all of this stuff, make myself feel like I'm not that stupid little girl that I was made out to be when I was younger. And I get to help other people try to get out of a more fixed, less growth mindset along the way, too. Because we don't live in a vacuum. And I know a lot of times when I was sitting, in my own room, all like boxed up and I felt very alone, I still, it was hard to see that I didn't live in a vacuum because that's what it felt like. But we can use the things that we learn to help us get out of feeling like we're so alone, even if it's by sharing what we're learning with others.
Yeah, like that idea of escape velocity.
Yes.
And I know for me, when I'm overwhelmed, sometimes I can be in freeze state and it can feel like I'm paralyzed and just this like emotional paralysis and physical paralysis. And I've definitely like felt that before. And just this idea that we don't have to be stuck there and that we can escape that. And whether that's momentum we build from learning or momentum we build from serving people with what we know, I think it's so important to recognize that we aren't defined by the skills we have now, and we aren't defined by whether or not we pass a class or how many times we drop text and context.
Or how many years it took us to actually accomplish a 2-year career.
Well, I was in school. I think it was a 4-year degree and it took me 6 years. So I am in that same boat. But then I actually did graduate with my master's. So it took a long time. But I did that in the regular 2-year span. So
yeah, that's awesome. It's just momentum and keep on keeping on. And people to show up, be like, hey, I feel like really nervous about this thing, and having a community that'll like RNTKY, that'll be like, you got this. Everyone would be so happy to have you. I said and play like, thank you. I needed just that little like, boop, a little push.
yeah, I love that. And I've been sharing things in RNTKY in the gratitude challenge that we're hosting right now. And it's been so powerful for me to be able to just look to gratitude. And I remember there was a day where I was like, there's nothing to be grateful for. And I was like, but I really want to keep up the habit of posting in the group. And also because I'm a leader in there. So I was like, I think it's important that I lead by example. So I pushed myself to do it. And immediately I started thinking more positively when I had to frame something I was grateful for and find that. And it just reminded me of how gratitude really can change your perspective. And I know when I was doing five things I was grateful for a day, I would think of like 20 other things throughout the day because I would just be thinking more about gratitude, and I would just think about having that expand. And I remember sometimes I would get to the end of the day and I'd be like, man, I really should have waited till the end of the day to say what I was grateful for because I put it in the morning, and then it's like, and now I have so much more to be grateful for. And I remember those days always used to be the hard days. It used to be like I I wanted to just post more of what I was grateful for.
I love that. It's I did um homework assignment for my Reiki teacher where like a week leading up to one of my classes, she had me like do like a private post in our own like little group text every day, like take a picture of something that you're grateful for, or or whatever, or something beautiful. It started off as something beautiful, and then it ended up being like I'm taking a picture of something I'm grateful for. And I still keep that practice because to me, I still do the gratitude where I write it down, but also like the visual person in me is like, yeah, I get to like go back in my notes in my phone and scroll through all of the pictures and go, oh, that's right. Like I went hiking that day, or even like today, like one day I think I had a picture of like the tip of my credit card because I was happy I had some funds in my account to be able to like pay for gas that day. But it was such a jarring, like one day it was like a beautiful landscape and the next day it was like a blank piece of paper with like a credit card number on it. It was just weird. But it's such a, and actually that reminds me, I learned recently, I was listening to an interview with Michael J. Fox, and it was towards the end where he was sick. And he said, and this is such a powerful, it was such a powerful quote for me. I actually posted it. It was, with gratitude, optimism is sustainable. And I was like, yes, that that like sums it up all in one like cute little sentence. Like it was just so powerful because I was like, exactly, that is kind of exactly where the gratitude challenge kind of comes from. So I just wanted to share that because I think it was just so powerful.
I think you did share that in RNTKY, and I think hearing it is even more powerful than just reading it. Like that was something that I could kind of like feel a physical reaction to, and when I just read it, I was like, that's nice.
Yeah, but I mean, like visually too, I'll paint the picture for you. It's Michael J. Fox in a chair, and he's, I don't know if I can't remember if it's Parkinson's, but he's moving around a lot because
Mm-hmm.
and he
I think it
just
is
looks like,
Parkinson's.
yes, yeah. So, and it was this woman, he was explaining how he's got people to help him and all of that, and it's hard for his loved ones and the people who help him because it's hard for them to see his physical and deterioration, and that is where he said, but I have the tools, or we have the tools to get through it, because with gratitude comes sustainable optimism, or I said it that way, he didn't say it that way, but it was just so powerful to see this man like smiling, and like he has every reason in the world to be miserable, like you know and it was just so, I was like, yeah, that's it, that's that's a new post-it note on my wall. Like yeah, it was powerful.
Yeah, another person who had Parkinson's who is probably one of the people I respect most is Muhammad Ali. His book was incredible, and I think he lit the Olympic torch like when he had Parkinson's, and just how incredible that was. If anyone wants to go look it up. But yeah, his book, Soul of a Butterfly, is so powerful. And every once in a while I'll post about it. And he has this quote that talks about skill. And he was like, it's like all this thing about being a champion, and then it's like, but the will has to be stronger than the skill. And that's how it ends. And I always think of how powerful that is, because when the will is stronger than the skill, you can develop any skill that you need that is important to you. And I love that. I love the just kind of like the idea of willpower, and just how powerful that is. And I think there are few quotes that move me as much as that one. But a lot of the ones that do move me as much as that one is actually in the same book. He wrote it with his daughter, and it's such a powerful book. And it's a strange font. Like, I don't really understand why it's like different fonts, and it's the only book I've ever seen really do that. But it's so beautiful. And there's so many golden nuggets in that one. Just really an incredible book. But that idea kind of like, and I think there's not an episode that's more appropriate for that quote than this one, is the will has to be stronger than the skill. And that idea that you can really like acquire any skill when your willpower is in it.
I think that's definitely, I think that's the best way to describe a yet mentality right there. That's a good quote. I feel like that book is probably on my list, so I just wrote it down.
It's very easy to read because the font is different on every page, so you actually don't recognize how much you're reading. But I know a lot of people don't like this, but I fold down like pages I always want to return to, and I go back and I'll just read the pages that I have highlighted or like folded. I know it's like a big no in like the book world, but that's what I do.
I feel like if it's your book, it's your book. You know what I mean? Like if it's, I think it's, I remember going to the library. Maybe I'm dating myself, but going to the library when I was younger, and there'd be like books that had whole like written it. I'm like, this is a library book. Like, but if it's yours, I feel like it's yours to do whatever you want with it. I personally find, not to totally go off on a tangent, but I actually find books that have like that are worn or have like stuff written in them or highlighted or like filled in some way to
Me
be
too.
super endearing. And I love those books so much.
Yeah, I remember when I was in school, I always look for used books that were already highlighted.
Yes. Oh, me too. I'm like, I want to do it.
And that helped me get through the readings because it'd be like, okay, this part's important. And it'd be easier to study. I would always think to myself, like, I don't know how I keep getting like people who are like coherent enough to like highlight the right parts, because I think if I did it, it would be like all over the place. But I was so grateful. I always had people. I got books from people who knew what they were doing with the highlighter.
That's like
fortunately,
that's a whole skill. Yeah.
Yeah, it saved me a lot of time.
I'll just highlight a whole page. Like, yeah. So don't ask me to highlight anything. Apparently.
So if there's one thought you'd like to leave everyone with today, what would it be?
Yet. That's it. Just yet. The power of yet. Whether it's I haven't had dinner yet, or whether it's I haven't learned to write the Magna Carta yet. Like, yet. It's use your yet.
Yeah, I think mine would be awareness for people, whether they have ADHD or they're recovering from trauma. If learning feels hard, give yourself the grace and remind yourself that Muhammad Ali quote, the will has to be stronger than the skill, and that if you keep trying, you can reclaim your power, you can reclaim whatever it is that matters most to you, and that you're not stuck in any situation that you might feel paralyzed in.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining today.